Chapter 1. You are listening at Novel Full. Audio. Chapter 1. The abandoned child. On the midnight of the first day of the year, the moon was shining so brightly that it looked almost like daylight. A new baby was born to the family of the elf's leader. But instead of happiness, tears could be seen rolling down from the eyes of the only daughter that the elf leader had. She was hugging the bundle of cloth that was used to wrap her baby when he was born. Her eyes were deep with sorrow, and her parents, with the other members of the village, looked at her with pity. They were all assembled at the mouth of the river, under the light of the New Year full moon. It was a beautiful night with stars shining brightly above them. Even though, the young lady's tears made this luxurious morning view lose its luster. Several minutes passed and the leader of the elven clan patted the young lady's back. "I'm sorry, Evelyn, but we can't let a human live with us. That's the rule of this land, we must banish him for the rest of his life," the elven leader said, feeling sad. As the young lady heard the leader speak again, she burst into more tears and the villagers pitied her even more. Evelyn knew about the regulations and traditions of their land, but it still broke her heart to see her child banished from the village when he was not even dead. If only he had been an elf, this won't be happening. The human that impregnated her was also deceased, perhaps her child would have been handed over to the man, but not anymore. The leader then carried a basket as he walked towards the flowing river that radiated the moonlight of the sky. The basket was laden with a cloth to make it comfortable for a baby to lie down in. Evelyn suddenly ran towards her child as she removed the pendant that was on her neck and placed it on the child's neck. "I know I'm a bad mother, but I'll still give you a name. I name you Kevin, the name your father was born. I hope this pendant would protect you, so stay safe, my Kevin," Evelyn said before the village wizard received the basket that was in the hands of Evelyn's father. Evelyn almost collapsed, but her father quickly caught her and then he cast a sleeping spell on her daughter so she won't jump into the river after her child. It didn't take a minute that Evelyn had slept off, she heaved a sigh of relief as she slept in her father's arm. "Although I want to make an exception, the king won't allow me to do that. Forgive me, Evelyn, but you must marry the crown prince and give birth to princes and princesses," Evelyn's father said, even though Evelyn had slept off. The wizard placed the basket in the river and used his magic to make the current carry the basket forward. After watching the basket go in a distance where they could no longer see it, everyone departed and went back to their houses to sleep. Each with his family problem. Evelyn's father carried her daughter as he headed back home. Evelyn's mother also followed after him with sorrow and pain in her heart. After every one of them was gone, remained the wizard whose gaze was on the flowing basket that was still seen by his magical eyes. He brought out a whistle and blew it loud as if to signal to someone at a distance. After blowing this whistle, he started running towards the forest to catch up with the flowing basket. At a distance from where the wizard was, a group of 6 elves could hear a whistle blown, and it was one that they recognized. They were at another point of the river, waiting for the basket to come their way. Thankfully, they saw the basket heading towards them and they used their magic to make it come to the river bank. Finally, the basket was at the river bank and they could see a beautiful human boy crying. To not draw other elves' attention, they quickly cast a sleeping spell on the baby and the baby immediately fell asleep. It wasn't long before the wizard arrived at the second river bank. The 6 elves all bowed in respect as they saw the wizard, and the wizard bowed back in respect. "Thank you for helping me with this, I owe you a lot," the wizard said. "No, master, we are just your disciples, we must do what our master bids us," one of the elves said. "Thank you so much, let's get going then," the wizard said as he brought out a magical ring, and then a white horse appeared from the ground. The 6 elves also brought out their magical rings and horses of different colors appeared from the ground. The wizard sat on his horse and then the basket was handed to him. It didn't take long that the 7 elves made their way deeper into the forest. Chapter 2. You are listening at Novel Full. Audio. Chapter 2. Just once days turned to months, and months turned to years, and in the 16th year, after Kelvin was born, everything seems to be perfect in the elven land. The used.to.be elven village has turned into a city. There was more advanced technology than before, and buildings made of glass could be seen at every corner of the city. Even though the elven land, which is now called the Sparkle City, has changed a lot, there is still a king ruling over them. The name of the king was King Darwin. He has 2 wives, one who bore him 2 children and the other who bore him none. Although the king realized later that the children were not of his blood and he had to expel them from the city. Kevin had grown up as a young teenager in the forest that the wizard had taken him to. Although he would often sneak out of the forest to see what the city looks like, the wizard would stop him before he could go any further. "How many times do I have to warn you not to go out of the forest? Do you want to get killed?" the wizard said as he squeezed Kevin's ear as a way of punishing him. Kevin's face had gotten red due to the pain he was feeling. He was struggling to get away from the wizard, but it was all to no avail. I'm sorry, I won't do that again. Please let me go, I'm so sorry. Kevin pleaded. L.RG. The wizard paused before letting Kevin leave. He sighed softly and then let go of Kevin's ears. "This is the 1000th time you will be pleading that you won't do that again. But you will still do that same thing tomorrow," the wizard said. "I don't know what to do with you anymore. Father, just let me have an excursion around the city for 1 day, then I'll come back to the forest. That's all. I just want to see what the city looks like," Kevin replied. The wizard shook his head in disapproval of Kevin's request and then entered a room where he often mentions Kevin as his workshop. It wasn't that he did not want Kevin to go outside, he was only trying to keep him safe since he was a human. And if he happens to go out into the city, the elves would quickly notice his human ears and smells. So he wants him to be in the forest till he finds a way of taking him into the city without anyone noticing his smell. The wizard stood at the entrance of his workshop and called out for the poor boy. "Kevin, do you want to see the city badly?" the wizard asked. "Yes, I want to see the city. If you would just allow me to visit it once, I'll be grateful," Kevin replied, his eyes full of hope that maybe the wizard would allow him to go to the city. "I won't be able to grant you that request. Practice more of your fighting skills with your brothers. You are so weak than a baby elf. I wonder how you'll be able to survive outside the forest," the wizard said sadly as he entered his workshop, closing the door behind himself. "But I'm not weak." Kevin was saddened. He thought that the wizard would give him the chance to go out of the forest, but unfortunately, he didn't. He then went out of the small house he has been living for the past 16 years of his life and went to meet his brothers. These brothers were the ones that had rescued him when he was a kid. They were the disciples of the wizard. It was evening time, so the disciples were discussing the things that were happening in the city. But as the 6 disciples saw Kevin approaching, they quickly changed their conversation or Kevin would be asking them about the city again. They also want Kevin to go out into the city, but they knew he was an abandoned child who could get killed if spotted to be a human. One of the disciples had gone to approach Kevin as they saw how moody he is. "Hey boy, is it about the city again?" the disciple named Derek said. "I'm so bored of my father, why can't he let me see the city just once?" "It is just once," Kevin lamented. "You need to trust your father, he's doing this for your good. He's trying to protect you," Derek explained. "As you can see, we are all elves, including your father. A mistake occurred during your birth and you became a human. Your father had to hide you away from all other elves or you might have been killed." While Derek was busy talking to Kevin, another disciple approached them with a bow and arrow. "Kevin, it's time for your training. You need to get stronger than you are, or you might not see the city you always long for again," the disciple called Bona said. Kevin sighed heavily before receiving the bow and arrow and then followed after Bona. Chapter 3. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 3. The 3 elves. Every day, Kevin would be trained to fight with fists, arrows, and swords, but even after all those training, he is still weak to fight a baby elf. It was as if his body was cursed from being able to fight. The wizard was so worried about Kevin, but despite all his magics and tricks, none of it were able to make Kevin grow stronger. And so he gave up and told Kevin to train all the time, maybe someday, he would get stronger. Kevin was with his bow and arrow and he was following after disciple Bona, who was taking him far away from the house to shoot at some birds or rabbits. They got close to a tree where several birds could be seen flying and singing, and then Kevin prepared for his hunt. "Aim correctly this time," Bona said as he pats him on the back, and Kelvin drew his arrow, ready to shoot at one of the birds. He had a bird in sight, but as he was about to let go of the arrow, the bird suddenly flew, causing his arrow to hit only air. Bona sighed as he shook his head in disappointment. Kelvin saw the expression on his face and felt sad for himself. "I'll go get the arrow," Kevin said as he walked off in a distance. Another disciple who had been watching Kelvin all the time had walked towards Bona. "What are we going to do with this kid, Silas?" Bona asked the other disciple. "What do you mean?" "We would just wait till Master gets an awakening spell for him. At least if he knows how to fight, we'll be able to create an artificial elf ear he could use, and we'll be able to leave this forest once and for all." Because of Kevin, the wizard would often stay in the forest, and the disciples who had pledged to always stay by their master the wizard had no other choice but to be in the forest with him. Although the wizard had told them to leave without him, they insisted on being by his side at all times. Some of the time, they would leave the forest for their families in the city, but they will still come back to the forest. "So, what about the ring we found yesterday? Has the master discovered anything about it yet?" Bona asked. No, I think it's just a ring lost by someone. Although it has this creepy feeling about it." Kevin had gone past the area where his arrow had fallen to, as his mind was flooded with lots of thoughts. He was lost in thought that he didn't know he was nearing some groups of elves who had come to hunt some forest animals. The elves were 3 in number, and they were all males. As they were busy scheming through the forest for something they could hunt, one of them suddenly saw a human walking toward them. "Guys, come and see this." Dan had called his fellow brothers, and they had also seen that Kevin was coming towards them. They didn't see wings on his back, nor did he have elf pointy ears, so they concluded that he must be human. "We can't lose this opportunity, we'll be able to sell that human for 5 emerald gems if we capture him. That way, we'll be able to attend the academy," Dan said, and the other boys' excitement had quickly grown. "Let's do this." An arrow was sent flying his way, and at the last moment, Kevin snapped out of his thought and managed to dodge the arrow, but it still sliced through his arm. "Gosh, when did I get here?" Kevin panicked as he started running towards the forest house, but the 3 elves started chasing after him. While he was running, Kevin had seen a big rabbit hole and he quickly hid in it. The 3 elves got near the rabbit hole, but they couldn't see any travel of Kelvin. "Heck! He escaped!" Dan shouted, and the other 2 boys were angry as well. "Now we'll not be able to enter the Mage Academy." Another lamented. "Forget about the academy, we didn't even have the emerald that we'll use to pay for the fees. My stomach hurts. Let's head for the mountains, we could find something valuable to hunt along the way," Dan said, and the 2 elves nodded in agreement. They picked up their bows and headed for a different destination. After they were gone, Kevin got out of his hiding and started running towards home. But while he was trying to get out of the rabbit hole, he failed to notice that there was a cliff on his way. He fell down the cliff and started rolling downwards. His arms and hands had started bleeding. "Gosh, why do I have to be punished this way? I just wanted to see the city, that's all." "Then why?" Kevin shouted in anger. He stood up from where he had fallen and saw that he had just appeared at the back of their forest house. "Thank goodness, the cliff is not too deep," Kevin said as he dusted off the dirt that was on him and then washed his bloody arms with the little water he found at the forest house. Afterward, he entered the house only to meet the wizard's angry face. The wizard was frowning his face that it had made Kevin's heart start beating loudly for fear of what was going to happen next. "You! Where have you been?" Chapter 4. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 4. Wounded, how many times do I have to tell you that you can't go out of the forest? The wizard shouted so loud that his disciples started running in. Why? Is it a crime to be born a human? Kevin said amidst tears. Yes, it is, to other elves. Your presence as a human is a threat to other elves. You must not be seen among all other elves or you'll be killed instantly. The wizard said as he motioned his hands through the hair of his head. This was a sign that he was getting angry. Can't anything be done? Can't I be magically turned into an elf? Kevin asked. I've not yet found a solution to this, just keep on training till I find the solution. Is that hard to do? Kevin stared at the wizard with watery eyes before rushing into the wizard's workshop. I hate you, Kevin said as he locked the door of the workshop behind him, leaving the wizard and his disciples speechless. Master, what should we do? Bona asked, feeling sad for the poor human boy. It seems like he was hurting a lot for being weak and unable to join other elves or humans. Bona had suggested for the wizard take the human boy to live with other humans, but the wizard would always refuse. He would often say that Kevin is not a human but an elf who is yet to become an elf. He mentioned something about Kevin's aura, that they were the color green, an elf's aura color. And the amount of yellow aura that was in his body is just a little, meaning that his body consists of mainly elven traits and only a little bit of human traits could be seen in him. Bona repeated the question, Master, are we taking him to the humans' land then? I said no. No matter how many times you ask, that my answer will always be no. The wizard replied before storming out of the forest house. A few of the disciples followed after him while the others were staying close to the door of the workshop in case Kevin finally opens the door. As soon as Kevin got into the workshop, he wanted to leave instantly but felt like he might not be able to see this again once he gets out of the room, so he locked the door behind himself and started looking around. The wizard's workshop was full of several magical stuff and elixirs. On the top of a table was a magic book where several teachings of magic were written. In the book are remedies to all kinds of problems, so Kevin started looking through the pages of the book to see if he could find a solution to the problem he was having. His weak body and the human physique. He looked through all the pages of the book but there was nothing that mentions or points to his weakness and type of problem. He tossed the book over to a side and almost slammed his fist on the mirror that was in front of him, but something caught his attention. It was a ring, a golden ring having a strange design drawn on it. He picked up the ring and brought it closer to his face for further examination. This ring looks so beautiful to be placed in a place like this, Kevin said as he slowly fixated the golden ring into his hands. Why put it on the table when it's meant to be worn on the hands? Arg! Kevin groaned in pain as he realized that he was putting on the ring on one of the fingers that was hurt earlier while he fell down the cliff. Blood had started coming out of his left middle finger and had dropped off the ring. Kevin tried to stop his fingers from bleeding, but surprisingly, he saw that it was already healing by themselves. The blood was being sucked by the golden ring that was on Kevin's middle finger. Not only that, but all other wounds that Kevin had were starting to get healed, and as his blood was being sucked by the ring, it kept on glowing brightly. It glowed so brightly that Kevin wasn't able to see anything due to how bright the ring was glowing. But it had abruptly stopped glowing and Kevin suddenly started feeling dizzy that he collapsed on the floor, all weak and tired. Chapter 5. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 5. A System. A few minutes later, Kevin became conscious, but he was sweating profusely and his head was throbbing in immense pain. He sat up and idled while his eyes were closed, for a bit, and then, after a few minutes, he opened his eyes. The headache had diminished a little and then, Kevin started taking in everything that had occurred previously. He remembered himself curing miraculously, but he had lost consciousness due to inner energy trying to enter his body. But what prompted all this? That was when Kevin remembered the golden ring. He checked his left middle finger where he had last seen it, but to his amazement, the ring wasn't in his hands. He checked around the floor and corners of the room but he could find nothing. Where the hell did it go? I didn't remember myself taking it off, so it must be somewhere in this room. He rose from the floor to search the table, but the sight of what he saw made him flinch. He stared at the mirror that was in front of him and saw something unusual in his eyes and ears. What is this? An elven ear. Kevin said as he reached the elven ear that he now had in substitute for the once human ear. It was an elven ear, he now has an elven ear. But that is not all, his face. They look more stunning and distinct than before. It was like he was an elven prince as his blue elven eyes shimmered just by looking at his appearance. How did this all happen? Kevin thought as he ran his hands through the long black hair that all elven would always have. Everything about him has altered, he looks different, and he felt re-energized. He didn't feel fragile like he used to feel when he was still a human. But something was astonishing to him. How did this happen? Is this the ring's doing? While Kevin was lost in his thought, an abrupt flash of memory had come to him. He remembered an image displayed to him. In the image was something written as a system, but he doesn't know what it is. System. What is it? As Kevin mentioned the system, a notification tab suddenly appeared right above his face. The notification tab was like how a computer would display specific notifications and information to the user. Kevin could see this notification tab and he could remember vividly that it was the same thing he had seen when he slumped on the floor. What could it be? He wondered before starting to read what was written on the notification tab. He was thinking that perhaps the system was trying to tell him about what it is, so he started reading. Triling System. What is that? This is kinda crazy, isn't it? How could I have no skills or magic? Heaven knows how I'll even level up at this rate. I wouldn't even be able to obtain any crystal because of my father. Kevin looked around the room he was in. There was no sign of gemstone or anything, so he kept on reading the other information that the system had, thinking maybe he would see something better. He moved over to the Stats tab. After reading everything that the system had to offer, Kevin just had to think of the notification tab and think of it closing, and then, it closed based on Kevin's thoughts. I think it's working with my mind. Kevin gave it a try again as he thought of the system opening up and the notification tab popped up in front of him. He then thought of it closing up, and it had immediately disappeared out of Kevin's sight. While Kevin was busy testing out the system, a notification suddenly appeared right in front of him. A new skill. But I thought I can't unlock it unless I complete a quest or had leveled up. Chapter 6. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 6. New skill, a spiritual eyes. Kevin clamored. Like. What does it means? There wasn't any information about the spiritual eyes, but an option had suddenly appeared under the skill, Elven Spiritual Eyes. Why bother asking? I'm an elf after all. I need skills like this right at the moment. Kevin chose yes, and the skill was equipped by the system. As he closed and opened his eyes, it was then that he realized what the system meant by asking if he wants to equip the skill. Everything around him was displaying only the colors of their auras. He could see different colors of auras coming from the magic tools and equipment that were in the room. The magic book that was even on the table had its aura. Everything around him had its distinct aura based on what they are and where they came from. Kevin hoisted his eyes towards the door and could see another color of aura moving around. The aura was in the shape of a human, so Kevin knew it was probably one of his father's disciples. He was thinking maybe it was perhaps his father and not his disciple, but even so, the person was an elf. The color of every elf's aura is green. The only thing that differentiates a strong elf from a weak elf is how glowing the green aura is. While Kevin was having fun scanning around his environment, he suddenly sighted a different kind of aura. It was yellow and was shining more brightly than every other yellow aura he had seen. He strode towards the yellow aura and then pulled it out of where it was hidden. But he had caught a glimpse of another aura again, beside it. It also had a yellow aura, but it was glowing more brightly than the one he had first seen. Kevin cancelled his spiritual eyes skill and looked at what he had found with his normal eyes. As he held the two things in his hands, the system suddenly notified him. Kevin separated both gemstones and then examined each differently. While he looked at the more glowing gemstone, which was now green in color due to his normal eyes, the system had shown him the information about it and he can't help but read it. Horned chameleon. That doesn't sound like a beast one can easily find. So that's why those guys from earlier wanted to kill me. It's so hard killing a horned chameleon. First, it is a dangerous, deadly beast that uses its tiny sharp horn that was placed on its head to slice at its enemy. Secondly, it also has the qualities of a chameleon, if not more advanced than a normal chameleon. It changes color according to the surrounding it is, thereby making it difficult to spot easily. Upon looking at the second type of gem, which was red physically, the system showed him another piece of information on what it is. What if I steal those crystals? Kevin smirked devilishly, and as if the system was in support of what he was thinking, it had suddenly notified him. You didn't even allow me to decide if I want to steal it or not. Kevin thought of stealing but was still unsure of doing it, but he was later convinced to take the gemstones. If I could catch up with those kids from earlier, they might tell me where the Mage Academy is. I need to get away from here, from my father. Kevin could see that the window was open. There wasn't any burglary that would hinder him from passing through, so he quickly jumped over the window and started running toward the city. Before he left, he made sure he take the gemstones and a few items with him. Part of those items is the book of magic that his father wrote several magic tricks and spells. He then jumped over the window and kept on running without looking back. As he fled towards the city, he made sure he avoided being seen by any of his father's disciples. Chapter 7. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 7. Consider it done. Few minutes after, Kevin finally got to the mountain where the three elves had said they were going. He had been searching around for them, but he could only see their bags and luggages that were safely kept at the foot of the mountain. They can't climb the mountain to hunt beasts, can they? Kevin thought, but then, he suddenly had a light bulb. He had completely forgotten that he has a special skill that could make him see the auras of people. Kevin activated his elven spiritual eyes, and as he looked around, he could see colors of yellow everywhere in the forest, so he quickly concluded that they were beasts' aura. It was when he was looking more deeper into the forest that he spotted three green auras moving around. He ran towards the aura and saw that it was the three elves he had met previously. They were running after a beast, but its speed was far greater than theirs, so they weren't able to catch up with it. If I'm to appear in front of them, they won't recognize me since I'm different now. I'm an elf and not a human anymore. They can't kill an elf of their race. And if it gets to the point of killing me, I'll try and escape or attack with this knife. Kevin thought before proceeding towards the elves. He hid the knife inside his cloth and approached the elves. The three elves had gotten tired and had stopped to rest for a bit, but then, Kevin had appeared in front of them. Who the hell are you? One of the elves had said as he tried to catch his breath. I need your help, guys. I lost my way in the city, can you please take me to the Mage Academy? Kevin asked politely, his hands in the pocket of his trouser. The elves looked at Kevin up and down and then rolled their eyes in anger. Are you insane? Why would you ask us to take you to the academy when there are other elves in the city that could lead you to the way? Kevin moved a step further. He needs to act like he was sincere about himself lost on his way to the academy. He needs to do something so they would be convinced to lead him to the way. Please help me, guys, I really need to go to that academy. It seems like they don't recognize me as the human they once chased. This is a relief, I hope my plan works. The three elves stared at each other as if they were transmitting some secret message within themselves. They moved closer to each other as they started whispering some things to themselves. Why don't we steal his gemstone? One of them suggested. I think that will be better than us running around, chasing after beasts or chasing some unknown humans. After stealing this, we would add it to the one gem that we have with us and then steal one more gemstone from another elf. Then we'll finally be able to leave for the academy. They all planned to steal Kevin's gemstone. Since they have been hunting, they managed to kill only one horned chameleon and they have only one emerald gemstone with them. Stealing 2 more gemstones would grant the 3 of them the opportunity to go to the Mage Academy. They took out their knives as they started making their way towards Kevin. Kevin could see that they were planning to rob him. "Hey guys, you don't have to do it the hard way. I could help you out." Kevin tried to stop the elves but they wouldn't budge. "We don't need your help, just put down the emerald gemstone that you have with you. Quick now." Kevin was forced to bring out the emerald gemstone that he had with him, but he made sure he keep 2 of the gemstone with him. "I'll give you guys 3 gemstones if you take me to the Mage Academy," Kevin said as he presented the 3 gemstones to the 3 elves. Like a flash of light, the 3 elves had gotten near Kevin and they hurriedly took the 3 emerald gemstones from him. "Brothers, it is 3 emerald gemstones," one of the elves exclaimed. The other 2 elves could also see that it truly was 3 emerald gemstones. They turned to look at Kevin in amusement. It was a wonder how someone like him was able to get such a rare gemstone as this. It must be that his parents were rich, or perhaps he was strong enough to hunt the horned chameleon, which seemed impossible for the 3 elves. Above all, the elves were glad they met someone like him. It was a lucky day for them. "Consider your request done, stranger," the eldest of the elves said. "What do you mean?" "I said, we'll take you to the Mage Academy." Chapter 8. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 8. Mage Academy. Kevin and the 3 elves had become friends in just 2 minutes and they were all going towards the Mage Academy. He would have killed or punished them for planning to rob him, but he's unsure of how powerful they could be. He wondered if he'll be able to defeat them all alone. What if he wasn't able to fight them and ended up being defeated by these elves with all of his belongings gone, including the stones he kept with him? He won't be able to get to the academy since he didn't know where it was located and didn't have stone he could use even if he gets to the academy. He had no choice but to act as friends with these elves for now. At least, they would take him to the academy at the cost of 3 stones. It is better than being robbed and killed. The 3 elves said that they won't be passing through the city because it was a long journey and they would have to enter about 3 transport cars before they could get to the academy. But they told Kevin that there is another shortcut they could pass that would take them to the academy in just an hour. It was already night time, so they had to sleep at the point where the darkness met them. They were still in the forest but were at a safe region where no beasts could pounce or rip off their flesh while sleeping. It was early at dawn and the 4 friends had started their journey to the academy. They walked for about an hour and wonderfully, they got to the gate of the academy. Kevin was amazed at the sight that was in front of him. Never in his life had he seen something like this, it was way beyond beauty. The gate of the academy was black and huge, about 9 feet tall. Soldiers were stationed in every corner of the gates. Cars and buses could be seen moving in and out of the academy. It was really a modernized world. The 4 elves approached the gate and a soldier had asked them what they want. "We would like to attend the mage school," the eldest of the elves said. "I hope you have everything you need to bring with you." After confirming that they were with everything, the soldier directed them towards a small entrance where students would pay for their admission into the Mage Academy. An old woman who had lots of gray hairs on her head could be seen seated in the admission room. She wore a round glass and her skin was already breaking due to her old age. "Welcome to the Mage Academy, my name is Mrs. Norby. I hope you are here with the required materials," the old woman asked and the 4 students nodded. "Fine, then let's start the screening." She told the 4 students to sit down and when she was done searching for the admission book, she started calling each elves one by one. The first elf was called and was told to say his name and to put down the required gemstones. After that, the other 2 elves were also called before it came to Kevin's turn. As Kevin sat before Mrs. Norby, she spotted something in an instant. It was the pendant that was worn around Kevin's neck. It looked a bit familiar to her. "Sorry to ask this, but, where did you get that thing?" Mrs. Norby asked with a suspicious look on her face. What is that? Kevin was confused on what the woman was saying. He was thinking that perhaps the woman had caught him for the gemstones he stole, or maybe she was able to see the aura of the ruby gemstones that was with him. She can't have that special eyes that I have, can she? Kevin thought as he chuckled with fear within himself. That. The woman pointed towards Kevin's neck. That pendant, where did you get it from? Air. My father told me that my mother gave me this before she died. Kevin almost rolled his eyes at the annoying old woman that was interrogating him. Oh, really? Sorry about that. Let's continue with the screening. The woman's eyes were still fixed on Kevin's pendant. Noticing that Mrs. Norby just won't keep her eyes off the pendant, Kevin had to button up his shirt so the pendant won't be visible to her anymore. The woman saw this and had quickly came back to her senses. She collected the gemstones from Kevin, wrote his name and then exited her office for further processes. I'll be back soon. The woman said as she exited the room. Hey, you have a cool name. One of the elves named Reed said as he approached Kevin from behind. He was the smallest, youngest and shortest of them all. After him was another elf whose name was Zoe, and the eldest of them all is Dan. Dan was at the same age as Kevin, but the two other elves were a year younger than the Dan. Dan and the two other elves were brothers of the same mother, but they had decided to attend the Mage Academy in the same year. They were orphans with no other living relatives, and they had to work as servants to survive. The three siblings got tired of being used as slaves by the rich and wealthy elves and had decided to attend the mage school. At least, they can learn how to use magic. It was every elf's natural ability to be able to create magic. And even if you're lagging and are as weak as a cockroach, you could still learn some magic spells that would make you a spell wizard or witch. Or you can train with swords and guns and become a soldier. Please keep on voting to get us to the top 200 list. We're shamelessly at number 1789. I know this book can do better, so I'm trusting you, my fellow readers. Chapter 9. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 9. Access cards. It didn't take long that Mrs. Norby had returned to her office. In her hands were 4 white plastic cards that are rectangular in shape and a bit thick. The 4 cards were handed to Kevin and the 4 students by Mrs. Norby, but the elves were clueless on what it does. That in your hand is your access card. It will grant you access to some certain areas in this school. It will serve as the device that will allow you to receive food, drinks and any other things you would need. Mrs. Norby explained. But note this, you must take the card along with you no matter where you're going. Either outside or inside the academy. And you must not lose it or you'll have to pay for it. How much is it if we have to pay for it? Reed asked, and the old woman just gave him a devilish smirk. 4 silver gemstones, no more no less. Mrs. Norby smiled within herself. She went towards her chair as she sat down with her legs crossed. 4 silver gemstones. Dan exclaimed, and the old woman just gave him a stare as if to quiet him down. That's worth about 32 emerald gemstones. Dan replied, and the other elves stiffened at the price. Mrs. Norby smiled as if her plan had just came to a success. Well, before I forget. You guys are now students of the Mage Academy. Welcome to the Mage Academy once again. Your journey as a pure mage, spell wizard and mage soldier begins today. Each student will spend the amount of years he wishes to stay as long as he's able to get to the required level. Meaning, you will be in this academy till you reach the level of a mage soldier. There are 3 levels that each student must reach. From an ordinary student to a mage soldier and to a pure mage or spell wizard, then finally to a mage master or wizard master. That's the hierarchy that was present in the Mage Academy. You can go on now, a teacher is outside that will give you a tour around the school. Once again, welcome to the academy. Mrs. Norby said, but her eyes were fixed on Kevin. After exiting Mrs. Norby's office into the Mage Academy, what they saw was shocking to them. Kevin and the three other students began to lift their heads to look around them. There were currently a total of 600 students standing on a plain open field, in a strange place that none of them seemed to recognize. The puzzlement on their faces spoke volumes. Kevin couldn't believe that there were a lot of students who were willing to attend this academy. "All right, the last sets are here," Kevin heard one of the teachers said. "So all the time we were talking with that crazy woman, there are students here who are waiting for us to arrive?" Kevin asked in disbelief. "Yeah, don't you know? A lot of them has been here since yesterday morning. Today is the admission day, so we were the ones who came late. But surprisingly, this place is more beautiful than the city," Dan said, and the students looked around the school. The green plain was not the only thing the students saw. There were 3 huge buildings directly in front of them. The buildings were elf images sculpted entirely out of glass. Each one stood at least 50 feet tall, but that was not the only thing that the field overlooked. They were standing on an elevated platform with a city in front of them, an hidden city. Everyone was already dressed up in a military uniform, and there were technological marvels appealing to them all. These devices were too advanced for their time. There were mechs, robots, cyborgs that were moving around freely. Some were even hovering above the ground. There were building machines, enormous things rising high into the sky with their crane. There was no one inside the machine, yet it laid down panel after panel of glass on a building that was still in construction. While the students were standing, amazed by what they were seeing, a teacher had suddenly started explaining. "As you all know, the beasts we all think are once powerless have managed to make a leap in their evolution and are far stronger than we think." The teacher was a male, whose long wavy hair were colored green. Not only that, but his eyebrows were also green in color. The students noticed that someone was talking, and they had suddenly paid attention to him. "My name is Chris and I am your homeroom teacher. I will be explaining things to you as we have the tour around the academy." Kevin was also listening attentively to the teacher. He didn't know anything about this world before, and he can't miss this opportunity. After the students had quieted down, Teacher Chris continued his speech. After the first war between the humans and the evolved beasts, the humans had managed to make leaps in all sorts of technological fields. This was because they had managed to salvage a lot of equipment from the evolved beasts once the war was over. The human military had decided to keep most of it for themselves. Some of the things they had found would just be too dangerous for the public to use. At least that is what they claimed. But some of our kinds who are among the military have claimed to know where every of this equipments are stored, but we need 12 strong, wise, and skillful students who will be taken to the human world. These 12 students will have the opportunity of learning what humans can do, the powers they could use, and their ways. After which he's able to grow more stronger, and if he's successful, he might become one of the humans' leader. But firstly, we need 12 best students who will represent us in the human world. The students had started murmuring among each other, and after the noise died down, Chris continued with his speech. "Different types of tests will be given to you, and if you're lucky to pass the first level of the test, you will be selected and taken to the next level." Chapter 10. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 10. Library. After the teacher had finished explaining the important thing that all elves needs to know, he then told all the students to be in 6 groups. Eventually, there were a total of 100 students per group in the front of the teacher Kevin and his group had been assigned to. They were quite lucky for being assigned to their homeroom teacher, Chris. "Okay, all of you should follow me as I take you around the school," Chris, who was up front, told them. While Chris was walking around, describing the various places in the vicinity of the academy, he had a perpetual, easy smile on his face, and it made the students feel welcomed as they walked around with him. "You guys should start to get to know each other as much as you can," Chris suggested. "Since you all will soon be classmates, try and make friends with each other while we move." All of a sudden, everyone started to get chattier, talking to each other as they were being shown around the school. "You know, we guys looks great together. How about we become friends?" Reed, the youngest of them all, said. Kevin thought being friends with the elves wasn't a bad idea. He approached them at the forest as an elf, but they didn't know he was the human they previously chased. They didn't seem so bad. They only hated the human him, not the elf him. And another thing is that, his facial looks were quite different compared to when he was a human. So he wasn't recognizable. He had a long pointy ear. There's no way they would call him a human when he clearly have elf ears. Having friends was a new thing to him. He spent most of his life being locked up in the forest. It is only advisable for him to have friends so he could catch up with how things worked in this world. Sure, that sounds great, Kevin replied. Then we're friends as from today. Dan replied as he shook Kevin's hands, and his brothers also did the same. Friend. So I finally have friends, he thought within himself. The four new friends continued the tour at the back of the class while the teacher kept leading them around the school. In the midst of the tour, a battle arena was shown to the students, where they had training equipments that each student could use to see how strong he had gotten. They were also shown their homeroom classes, battle classes, sports rooms, and all sorts of facilities. Chris never failed to provide a little bit of explanation about each area of the school they visited. However, Kevin was uninterested in most of them until they had finally reached the library. As you can see, the library here is split into 3 floors. Ordinary students and mage soldier students are only able to access the first floor. Pure mage and spell wizard students can access the second floor. Finally, the upper floor is only for master mages, master wizards, and other authorized personnel. Kevin was interested in the library because it contained books that weren't available to the public. In this place, Kevin just might be able to find some information about the system and more about the types of magic that we have, though he earnestly hoped that it would be on the first floor. Eventually, the tour came to an end just outside the school's dorms. And this is where you will be living during your stay here. Once you have dropped off your things, feel free to explore around the academy. There will be no lessons today, so enjoy the free time and make sure to be in your rooms during the curfew. Each student was then handed a number written on a piece of paper. These papers displayed which room they would be staying in. From the corner of his eye, Kevin noticed in his eye that the other 3 elves were coming towards him. Hey, Kevin, what room number did you get? Zoe asked. Air. 52, 52. The 3 students exclaimed at once, no way. What a coincidence. We all got the same number. Seems like fate is really bringing us together, Reed noted excitedly. Maybe. Kevin replied wryly, but right from a corner, he could see someone staring at him. It was a female with a purple-colored hair and a white beautiful skin. She was looking at the paper that was in her hands and kept on staring at Kevin. What's wrong? Dan asked, but he said it was nothing, and the 4 friends made their way towards their dorm room. After Kevin and the other elves had finished unpacking, they were free to do what they wanted for the rest of the day. It was still morning, so they all had plenty of time to explore the academy. Kevin ended up becoming someone who could leave the forest to live with other elves. The thing he had been denied to do ever since he was born was now what he was doing now. Although he would say he didn't miss his father, the wizard, he still feel like he did something bad by escaping from home. But as time goes on, he will get over the bad feeling. Now he's sharing his room with 3 elves, and to his surprise, he knew all 3 of them, Dan, Zoe and Reed. There were 5 single beds in the room, each spread out from one another evenly, but other than that, the room was pretty empty. There was just a single desk and a cupboard for each person to use by the side of their bed. Students were expected to spend most of their time studying or practicing their skills, as there was no time for pleasure. That was why the rooms were designed for efficiency. I guess we're supposed to be 5 in this room, or what do you think? Zoe popped the question out. Kevin had noticed this as well. Perhaps the girl she saw previously was their 5th roommate. But that didn't make sense. Why would boys and girls sleep together in the same room? What if something bad happened? No, Kevin do not want to think of it. It just didn't make sense. Kevin blurted out, he had forgotten that he was in the midst of other curious elves. What is it, Kevin? What doesn't make sense? Air. That. Kevin stammered before calling all other students together as he started whispering into their ears. I think our fifth roommate is a female. They all burst into laughter after hearing Kevin talk. Wait, who told you that? Dan asked. Kevin felt a bit embarrassed after saying what he said. It was just an assumption. He's not sure if the girl was truly their fifth roommate, but he decided to watch as things go. Don't mind me, I'm just joking. Kevin laughed it off and quickly changed to another subject. What do you guys want to do then? Zoe asked the others. I'm still unpacking, but you guys don't have to wait for me. Feel free to go out and explore. Reed, the youngest of them all, replied meekly. I was thinking of heading to the library, Kevin said. That will probably be too boring for you too. Boring? Nah, reading won't be boring to me. Besides, I love reading books. Dan paused. Which kind of books, brother? I don't think I ever saw you read a book once. Reed said. Alright, that's it. It's been a long time since I last read a book. I'm not going to lie again, so don't embarrass next time, Reed. The four of them laughed, and then, Dan and Kevin agreed to head to the library together. While Zoe said he would be staying with Reed to do the unpacking. When they arrived, they found that the first floor was surprisingly bustling with students. Kevin noticed that there were multiple round desks spread out where students were sitting, and in the middle of the desk was a glowing orb. Ah, you're probably wondering what that orb thing is in the middle, aren't you? Dan asked. It looks like they don't have them at public schools. If you touch the orb, then it allows you to create an isolated space. Inside, only those people who have been invited can hear each other. This way people are able to chat as much as they want without disturbing others. Wow, Kevin was quite surprised at how far technology had evolved. Being locked up in the forest was really bad. There are things going on in the city that he didn't know are happening. Thankfully, he's gaining a lot of information. He won't be left behind when others are chatting and talking. Kevin and Dan chose a table that had two other people sitting on one. Just as Dan had explained, Kevin could see the two talking but couldn't hear a word. According to Dan, the orb had a limited range and could only cover the surrounding tables, though. Please keep on voting to get us to the top 200 list. We're shamelessly at number 1789. I know this book can do better, so I'm trusting you, my fellow readers.